A nice cruise vacation can be quite costly for some individuals, especially those who don't have much money to spare. Some individuals may put money down for years in the hopes of purchasing a ticket on one of these incredible ships. But one old woman's ideal vacation nearly went horribly wrong. Welcome to USA Stories channel. Do not forget to subscribe and activate the bell button to receive all new updates. Now let's go to the story. Back to the narrative now. Ellie Smith was an elderly woman who most people would consider to be unremarkable. Her age was 76, but her life had not been an easy one. Ellie was raised in an extremely low-income yet deeply religious household. They all adhered as faithfully as possible to the teachings of the Bible and had a deep trust in God. In order to fit in with her family, Ellie joyfully followed her family's religious practices as a young child, even though she was unaware of the laws and restrictions that accompanied the Bible's teachings. But as Ellie grew older, she started to doubt the things her family and the Bible told her. She wanted to go out and have fun like her friends did when she was a young woman, since she had witnessed them doing so. Ellie met up with some of her pals one night after sneaking out of her house. They even sneaked a couple drinks with them at a nearby hangout. Ellie was enjoying her little moment of independence and was having a good time when she suddenly saw a pretty young man across the room who appeared to have seen her as well. Ellie turned her head as soon as she saw the kid looking at her, but a few seconds later he approached her to have a conversation. The youth identified himself as George, and soon after that, the two adolescents were having a lengthy talk. Ellie sneaked away again a couple more times after that night. But a few weeks into their encounter, the young woman's life completely collapsed when she found out she was pregnant. Ellie, barely 16, was at a loss for what to do. Since she understood that her family did not think that a girl should date a male till she was married, she was afraid that her life would end and how they would respond. After a few weeks, Ellie's tummy continued to swell. She was aware that she would have to disclose the incident to her family. Ellie's father was incensed after hearing the news and alerting her relatives, thinking she ought to be removed from the family since he had reared a bad kid. But Ellie's mother managed to persuade her husband to allow Ellie to stay. The only condition was that after the baby was born, she would have to place it for adoption. Ellie was horrified to hear this. She consented, though, as she had no notion what to do next. She reasoned that it was probably for the best, since I wouldn't know how to raise a child. After 9 months, Ellie's due day finally came around. A healthy baby boy was born to her, and he was soon taken to his eager family, who, upon his birth, had made the decision to adopt him. Ellie was devastated when her kid was removed from her and only had one chance to see him. As the years went by, Ellie made a name for herself. She was able to obtain employment as a teacher at a nearby school and possessed a modest house. Still, it was sufficient for her and her spouse alone. Unfortunately, adoption or surrogacy were too costly for Ellie and her husband, who were married but unable to conceive. The elder woman couldn't help but wonder what had become of the kid she had carried in her earlier years at this period. She couldn't locate any information on her son, though, because the adoption was closed. As the years went by, Ellie and her husband decided to save money for a very costly luxury trip as a way to make up for not being able to have children. The couple's financial situation was modest, but they pinched penny after penny and saved as much as they could until at last they had enough cash. Regretfully, Ellie's spouse suffered a fatal heart attack just months before of their scheduled vacation, and he sadly departed away. Ellie was so overcome with sadness. She couldn't believe her spouse was no longer with her since she had loved him with all of her heart. The 76-year-old, however, was adamant on living the remainder of her life to the fullest, since she felt it was what her husband would want. The old woman took her ticket and left on her cruise when the time arrived. She would always remember the incident, though. Ellie couldn't help but notice all of the extraordinarily well-dressed people surrounding her as she stood in line to board the ship. She couldn't help but notice all of the glares they were giving her, though, on top of that. It appeared as though the elderly woman's appearance was the basis for everyone else's judgment. Ellie's outfit was obviously worn and torn, with the old lady even having to sew up a few small holes herself. Ellie had no intention of parting with that specific dress. Her husband had loved it, and she didn't think things that still had life in them should be thrown away. As soon as the old woman boarded the ship, things only got worse. The security officers regarded her with the same contempt as the other travelers. Ellie was even dragged out of the check-in queue by a security who wanted to make sure she had the right ticket because he couldn't believe someone who was obviously so poor could afford such an opulent vacation. Fortunately, Ellie's paperwork was all in order, and she was permitted to board the ship. But on the way to her cabin, the old lady was approached by a steward who informed her that the captain had asked to see her. Ellie was shocked and couldn't understand why the captain wanted to meet her. Because she wasn't as wealthy as everyone else, he wasn't surely throwing her off the cruise ship. With hesitation, Ellie followed the steward to the captain's location. She worried the whole time that she would not get to go on the vacation that she and her spouse had always wanted to do. Ellie was escorted by the steward to the dining room where the majority of the other guests had gathered. They all gave the elderly woman a visibly hateful and contemptuous look. They even started muttering that it was about time the old lady was thrown off the ship when they noticed that the captain was waiting for her. But the captain couldn't help but smile when he saw the old woman. Ellie was initially perplexed. Why was the captain staring at her with such warmth and candor? The old woman approached the captain when she was near enough and said something quietly. Her words, "I'm not sure what's going on here," were unclear. All the man did was give her a kind smile and say something that made Ellie start to cry. "It's been a long time, Mom." It out that her son Joshua was in fact the cruise ship's captain and had been looking for his biological mother ever since learning he had been adopted. He had been able to learn her name, but he had not been able to locate her residence to pay her a visit because she and her husband had moved about a lot. Joshua was eager to surprise his mother because he had noticed her name on the guest list. Ellie felt overpowered by the circumstances. Because the adoption agency wouldn't provide her with information about her son's location, she had always wanted to find him, but had never been able to. After the mother and son embraced, the captain turned to face the bewildered onlookers. "This is my mother," he declared. "Due to events beyond her control, I have finally met her for the first time in 60 years. I'm overjoyed to have met her at last. Don't ever undervalue the people in your life, as you never know when you could run across them again." The audience as a whole cast shamed glances down. They didn't even know the old woman's tale, so how could they have judged her so harshly? Ellie, unaffected by the opinions of others, devoted the remainder of her trip to spending as much time as possible with Joshua in the hopes of developing a strong relationship. Ellie and Joshua continued to communicate even after the vacation ended, happy to be back together after all these years apart. What a charming tale. It simply goes to demonstrate that you should never make snap judgments about someone based only on their appearance, since you never know what kind of experiences they may have had. Treat each other with kindness. Please share your thoughts about the story in the comments section below. Please remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our videos. If you enjoyed the tale, the next video that plays on your screen will probably move you too.